senior. Thank you. Oh, darn, I should have said all the embarrassing things first, I don't know what they would be, but yeah, so I TA'd operating systems and systems. And I think if you were a senior, I think I TA'd you for systems, if my math is correct. You might not remember me because like half of it was virtual, but so fun fact about that is that I was Bowie's favorite TA. It is in fact my Twitch name when we went virtual. And there's a story behind this, whether Bowie remembers or not. When I was at Junior Parents Weekend, Bowie met my parents and he told them that he wished that I would TA for him. And at the time I was currently TAing for him. So that's why I'm Bowie's favorite TA, because to make it up to me in class, he called me his favorite TA. So it's his words, not mine. But anyways, so yeah, a little bit about my role at ARM. So if you don't know what ARM is, Bowie mentioned, you might know from the assembly language. I know before I started at ARM, the only thing I knew about it was the ARM assembly language. I didn't really realize that it was like a living, breathing company. I kind of thought of it as one of those like kind of historical things that you learn about in class, and it's probably like dead and gone and whatever, because I hadn't really heard about it. But in fact, it's actually like has a pretty big impact, I would say. We're not super huge in number of people, but so we have, we make chips, the semiconductors. So we don't actually make anything physical. We just sell the designs of them. But you can find ARM technology in anything from like data centers. We do automotive, like autonomous vehicles. That's kind of a new thing. Embedded devices like Internet of Things. But our biggest thing is mobile. I really got to look up the percentage. There's some wild percentage, but we're in like almost every cell phone. So probably you're using ARM technology, don't even know it. So I'm a software engineer. That's my title. I started in August of 2020, working from my parents' house, actually. So I've been doing this for a year and a half. And I work in the open source software group on the networking team. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so what does open source software look like at ARM? So at ARM, we actually have a whole group dedicated to open source software. It's definitely a very unique place to be, especially even just being a software person at like a hardware company is very interesting. Like I know when I was in school, like I was a computer science major, not computer engineering, but I was always kind of at the more like low level end of that. And I thought I was like real, like unique in that it was like very low level. Like I really liked OS and CompArc, and I took compilers and stuff. But now at my company, it's like my friends are like writing Verilog in their daily lives, which is something that I, never really thought too much about. So
Art just left too, man.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's very interesting. I definitely feel a little bit like the black sheep, being the software people at the hardware companies. It's interesting. It's rewarding in that it kind of stretches me a little bit. Even just talking to other people about what their work is very interesting, because it's a whole like world I never explored. But anyways, so this is the open source. We have a whole group for this. So there is some presence of software even at a hardware company. There's a bunch of different teams under open source. These are just a few of them. So we have the kernel team, which obviously works on the Linux kernel. The firmware team, I worked on that team briefly during a rotation. They do firmware, everything's pretty much what it sounds like. Android, automotive, IoT, and then the networking, workloads, and containers team, which is the team I'm on. So it's like 3 sub-teams in one team, but mostly the reason they're grouped together is it kind of has to do with like what we call infrastructure, which is mostly related to like data centers, and in my case, data centers / like networking stuff. So the real question is, why would ARM participate in open source software? And there's 2 main reasons for that. The first is making sure that software that's out there makes the most of ARM technology and new architecture features. So like Bowie mentioned, like ARM has its own architecture. It's just like you have there's like two main ones. There's, x86 and there's the ARM architecture. And so they're constantly developing new features for the chips, like maybe some part of it that does like complex, like it's like more suited to like linear algebra kind of stuff, like, matrices and vector math. I'm doing some stuff with that right now. Or like some new instruction that can do something to memory, like in 2 clock cycles instead of 5 clock cycles. I don't know. So, when the hardware people, come up with this new feature, right, and add it to like the instruction set, those things are only as good as the software that uses them. So if nobody's using those new features, like the chip's not going to be any faster if you're not making use of these things. So that's why it's important for ARM to be involved in software. And then also we want to make ARM easy to use and give the best performance. So we want basically like things to run faster on ARM and to just kind of just work. So that's why like we do a lot of software and like, make it so that people want to buy our stuff because it just works better. Okay, so a little bit about my actual like team and my work. I'm not going to go into this too much because it's like kind of confusing. So if you have more questions at the end, like we can like dive into it. But on the very surface, my team works on networking. And there's a few different projects underneath this team, but I work on one called the Data Plane Development Kit. From like a really high level, basically, when you do normal networking in Linux, you have like the application, and then it interacts with the kernel, which then interacts with the network controller. So like every thing that's connected to the internet will have like a separate, it's called a network interface controller. I get that right? God, I hope so. I just called it NIC. But it's like the wireless card, like in your laptop or something, or in your phone. And so there's that extra like level in between the actual program that you're running and then the hardware, the network controller. So then what my project does is kind of connects the application directly with the network controller and takes that kind of extra step out of it at the kernel level. And this like helps things be like extra fast because you can avoid that, like the context switching that happens with system calls to the OS. If there are like freshmen and sophomore who haven't like taken OS, like I'm really sorry, but ask if your junior friend to explain it to you. And
they've heard of system calls.
Oh, amazing! Oh, that's right, in systems. That's right. Well, the freshmen, I don't know, but I guess you can take systems earlier now. Well, aren't you guys cool? And then also like it allows you to write these like really optimized drivers for different devices. Drivers are just like code that corresponds to devices that are external to the processor, the CPU. So that's like what I work on like day in, day out is driver code basically. Oh yeah. I asked my boss, I was like, what should I tell them? Like, what's the most like real world thing I can tell them? And he said, look for the towers. He literally went like this. He's like, look for the towers and then go to the bottom. That's where our code is. So like a cell tower or network tower. That's where our code is. Okay, so who works on this project? Because it's not just ARM. It's a really big project actually. And this isn't even all of them. This is just some of the people who work on it. Kind of broke this down into categories. So we have, these companies are mostly like semiconductor type of companies. ARM and Intel are big on like CPUs. I'm not 100% sure what NXP, I know they're semiconductor, but I don't know exactly what they're doing. And NVIDIA is mostly known for their graphics processors. So those are kind of like processor semiconductor type of people. And then you have like networking people, obviously AT&T. This is like, we think about like cell service and stuff, and Ericsson and Marvell are like networking equipment. And then you have players like Microsoft. Like the reason Microsoft might be interested in working on this is like they have their own like cloud platform, which deals with networking, obviously. And then you have Red Hat. Red Hat is like kind of like a unicorn in this. At least I think they're kind of unique. Like Red Hat's model is like basically just like packaging Linux, which is already like a free software, and providing like support and just like a really like streamlined experience. So they'll like with GPDK, they'll like package it up along with their Linux. So that way you could just like have it work right out of the box. So that's why they might be interested in working on it. Okay, and then, so in general, so not specific to my project, but in general, why would companies participate in open source? So I've boiled it down to like 4 reasons. The first one is reputation. This is Taylor Swift's Reputation album, if you don't know. I'm a big fan. And I think that a good example of this is Red Hat, like I was just talking about. So like I said, Red Hat makes a business out of basically like packaging up Linux and providing support and that experience, right? And maybe some extra like test cases or applications that go along with it. And so they're taking advantage of this, big piece of free software. So they're expected to contribute in return. It's kind of like a good neighbor type of policy. Like you can't just like take free software and do nothing for it. That would be like really evil. So that's like one reason. I also think of the Microsoft loves open source thing, which I don't know a ton about, but I think if you've heard that slogan, I think that probably goes along the lines of this reputation as well. Another reason is innovation. So it makes a lot of sense when you think about it that, when you open it up to a community versus just within the, in your own ecosystem within one company, you get so much more people working on one thing than you could with one company. It's a lot like cheaper because, if you're getting outside help, right? You don't have to pay those people, right? You do have to pay people in your company, but at the same time, so there's a lot of innovation, but you don't get that for free. You still have to contribute yourself in order to kind of like stimulate the community. So I included this quote. This was someone talking about 5G. Open source enables innovation, but if it is not adopted at scale, then people will lose interest. So they still participate in order to kind of push things along. The next thing is community influence. I think this is a big one. So if you have something like, the Linux kernel, which is already obviously like very, very popular, very ubiquitous in wide use, you might want to get in there and be like, well, I want Linux to run faster on ARM, or I want, or maybe you have some kind of long-term strategy, like ARM knows that they're going, this is not a real scenario. I don't know anything about this. So maybe ARM knows like they're going to come up with some new like lock or something, or some new instruction, or like these vectorized instructions I'm talking about. Like they might try to like guide, the path of this project or this community kind of in that direction that makes it more like amenable to this new feature that they have. So that's a big part of it is that community influence. And then this kind of goes along with that optimization, like it just works the best on ARM. So like that's a big thing with my project GPDK is we're constantly trying to like optimize performance so that, we can say it works like 10% faster on, our thing than Intel's thing. And so you should buy our thing, basically that's it. And then I have a little summary of some pros and cons of working in open source. This is my personal opinions. And then also I polled my boss and one of my coworkers. So we got a little consensus going on. The biggest thing I think is the collaboration across companies. So you get a broader range of inputs and opinions, which can bring in like new ideas and perspectives. So if you're looking at a problem in one way, but then you get some review from somebody else and they have a new idea that could come up with a better solution or something. Also, I think one of the nice things about this is like, even though like I work at ARM, but the, we make the processors, but we interact I'm writing driver code, so I interact a lot with the network cards. So we'll be using there's a variety of vendors for the network cards. And like one of them, for example, is Intel. So like we'll be working with some combination of like an ARM processor, but an Intel, NIC card. That's the network card, sorry. And if I have an issue with that or I don't understand something, like I can get in touch with someone at Intel like very easily, like just like one email, like I know exactly who to contact. So I think that's kind of cool. You get to kind of like, it's a little more cooperative, get to work together in some ways. My boss, this one's my boss's, he really likes that there's a wider impact because your software is not just for the people who necessarily buy your product. It's like anyone using this project. The third thing is code quality. So not only do you go through like an internal review process, you also have the external review of the community. And then also, again, like you have so many different people looking at something that might have a different perspective. So that improves the quality of the reviews as well. And then this one is a big one, I think. Building your personal reputation. So it's really cool that, the work that you do is open and available, like for free on the internet. So like, if you wanted to like see what patches I've contributed to my project, like you can go see them. You might not understand them, but you could go see them if you want to. And so that's really cool because it's like a resume that you can take with you. Like if I'm applying for a new job, like I could be like, hey, look at this work that I did. And also just you get to build, like make a name for yourself within a community. So you have that kind of sense of accomplishment. It's like a nice goal to like reach for. Like, like, oh, that's, this person and they manage, you can become a maintainer. That's like, you're in charge of like a certain block of the code. So that's kind of cool. And it's like a reputation that extends beyond just your company, right? And then another thing, this is a me thing. I just like kind of that I can openly talk about what I'm working on. I know people that have worked for like consultants for like the government and stuff, and like they can't say anything about what they're working on. And I kind of like that. I'm like, well, I can say whatever I want because it's available for free on the internet. That one's kind of silly, but I kind of like it. The cons, so the first one is that it can be a little slower sometimes, because you have to get because it's a community, it has to be accepted by, people with lots of different agendas, basically. So you have to come to some kind of like consensus. So there might be disagreements, or in another hand, there might be some kind of like external dependency, like you're waiting on somebody to do something, and they're not at your company. So it's harder to like, strong arm them into doing it. And then also, like I mentioned before, you do have that like internal review process before you have the external review process. So it kind of adds another layer. And then for me, this is me personally, I think that it can be intimidating to start in the beginning. I know like when I was doing my first ever patch, it was like really, really tiny thing. But I kind of like obsessed over it because there's all of these, standards of how, the code formatting, and even just the commit messages. Oh my gosh. In school, you could write you could write your commit message and be like, ha ha ha, this doesn't work. That is no longer true in the real world. So it can be a little intimidating because that, what you're writing is going to be seen by just such a wide variety of people, and people that you have no direct relationship with. Like, it's not just you showing your teammates or even your boss. It's like, could be someone at some other company who, is looking at your work. So that can be pretty intimidating. And then the other thing is that you do have to be a good citizen of the community and put forward a good faith effort to test on other platforms. Because basically, if I submit a patch that makes ARM work better but makes Intel actively get worse, it's not going to be accepted. Because
you would never, Kathleen.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's like if Intel crash. But so it's So we have to often like do a little bit of extra performance testing, which is the worst, by the way. That's my least favorite part of my job. So I have to do it like twice. I have to test it on ARM, then I also have to test it on like Intel to show that it doesn't get any worse. It doesn't necessarily have to get better. It just can't get any worse. And so sometimes you're like, it just be so frustrating. Because you're like, this isn't even my thing. Like, why am I testing this? It's not my company. But yeah, so that's just kind of a personal grievance I have. It's not that big of a deal, but I just think it's a bit of a pain. So yeah, that was pretty much all I had. Any questions about my job, about open source, what class to take, not OS? Don't take OS with Bowie. I don't know.
I can't make that joke anymore.
You can't? Why can't we make that joke?
It's disrespectful to the students or something. I have like 90 people next semester, so they clearly did not get that message. Can you go back a slide, Kathleen? Yeah. I think it's a good jumping point. So, do you guys have any questions, first of all? Yeah, I have one. Okay, we got Tom here has a question. Good. Well, let me switch to the face so that they can see you rather than just look at the slide. All right, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, so I think it's pretty cool that there are a bunch of companies working on open source, but do you guys ever get randos like contribute to project or like small hobbyists, or is it all these giant companies?
I think there are randos, as you say. There's like one person that I'm thinking of in particular that I see his name a lot. Usually it's like something at, somecompany.com. So I think there are, but I don't know how they compare to the large companies. I know that, so for my project in particular, we have maybe like 5 people from my team working on it. And that's like for the whole company of ARM, there's like 5 people working on it. My project is like a very big project. Versus at Intel, there's like, I'm told there's like hundreds or something of people working on it. So if you are an individual contributor, you might like be small in comparison, but I do know that there are some, and I think it would probably depend on the project, like how far along it is and how, like this project's been going on for like 10 years. Actually, yeah, it's 10 years. So it's pretty big at this point. And I mean, you have like the Linux kernel, for example, like if you want to contribute to the Linux kernel, like people do that.
Any other questions? All right, I have a bunch. So, Kathleen,
yes.
Say that it can be intimidating to start. So one, what do you recommend for students to do in terms of how to get started? And then 2, for you, was there like an on-ramp internally for ARM, or did they just say, here's a project, go figure out how to get involved?
Okay, maybe we'll answer these backwards. I'm going to answer your second one first. There definitely was like an on-ramp. It wasn't just like, go look at this and figure something out. I think especially because this project in particular is very like confusing. The code itself is like very confusing when you look at it because it's just like, it's highly optimized code. So it's not necessarily, I feel like the more optimized something is, like the less readable it is. So it took me like a very long time, I feel like, to fully understand it. But I will say, in terms of like getting started, the way that they started me out was like just picking something so small, like not starting with like, I'm going to rewrite this entire application, because first of all, that's probably not going to get accepted. And second of all, that's just like too much. So I think the very first thing I tried to do was like a documentation patch. Like it was like, this wording is wrong, and the good thing about that is that you can walk through the process of like review and getting all the like the commit message and whatever. And you can walk through that process before someone's critiquing your code, So I think that, and then I kind of worked my way up from there, just making like small changes. Bug fixes are really good because like people really like those. So if you find something that's wrong and that you can fix, that's a good place to start, versus like now I'm working more on like performance related stuff. that takes a little bit more like critical thinking. It's a little less obvious, and that requires like testing too, versus like a bug. You have to test a bug fix, but performance testing versus like functional testing is very different. Performance testing has to be a lot more rigorous. You really need to like show the data that this like improves, versus like bug fixing. It's like, it didn't work before, it works now. It's a little more straightforward. I don't know if that answered your question, but
That's good.
Mhm.
And that's what I tell students, right? I tell them to do a doc fix and do bugs, and then you graduate towards, perhaps implementing something.
Yeah.
So I guess along those lines, what from your undergrad helped prepare you for this? Or was this sort of like nothing and I had to learn it all on my own?
That's a good question. Let me think about that. Cause I would say like, yes, like both. Like there were some parts of it that like undergrad is never going to prepare you for, because you're obviously just like looking at something completely, like, I feel like part of engineering in general, especially engineering at ARM and in this job particularly, I feel like I'm constantly like looking at new things, and having to like learn how it works. But I mean, like those essential skills, you don't lose, like debugging and understanding things. And I think also just like the overall concepts versus like the actual code, like just like you can apply like kind of the archetype of what you learned in school, and you can look at a program and say, oh, I kind of understand like what's happening here. Like, oh, that's a linked list, or this is, a general, like, I don't know, locks or something. Like, so it's not completely, you might not understand every single part of it, but you'll understand kind of like modularity, things like that. Those concepts will help you like view the code like through the lens of what you learned, and you'll understand more than you think.
So along those lines, I think a lot of discussions lately I've had with students, not just this year, but in previous years, is how can I say, the quality of a Notre Dame education. And I guess, how did you feel in terms of how well you were prepared for the work that you did, in the sense of compared to your colleagues or the people at your business, or in terms of the people that you're collaborating with? Like, did you feel like you were underprepared, you were adequately prepared? I don't know how you'd be overprepared, but I mean, like, how did you feel like in terms of what you got in terms of the content or the skills from Notre Dame, in terms of, I think, relative to others?
This is an interesting question. And the first thing that's popping into my head is most of my friends that I've made here who aren't necessarily in the same role as me, most of them are hardware people, most of them went to Michigan. So I feel like I have a very direct comparison. But a lot of them had a different major than, they were like computer engineering or something, and they're hardware people. So it's different. But I would say, oh God, what was the question was, do I feel adequately prepared? I think one thing I would say about this job in particular was my job is in networking, correct? And I didn't really feel like I had a lot of networking knowledge specifically coming in, which I was very like insecure about for like the first like year I was working here. But my boss like kept telling me over and over, he's like, we knew that when we hired you that, networking wasn't your be all end all. It's not like they have like these certification exams like the Cisco, where it's like not like you're Cisco certified and you can set up a LAN in like 2 seconds or whatever. But we know that you have those foundational skills, the understanding of those higher level concepts, just familiarity with Linux, familiarity with C programming. Like I write C day in, day out. And that is like the best part of my job, is that I never have to touch another language because I am such a low level person. I've had to do like the tweetsiest bit of some other stuff like Python and bash scripting, but that was on my rotation mostly, not in my current. I mostly just write C. And I'm not mad about it. So I think that regardless, I think those foundational things like are what make you prepared. And somebody's on my door. I might ignore them. Yeah, so I think that those foundational things really will carry you further than you think. I don't know if that answers.
So I guess along those lines then, for students here, right, there's always a tension between, getting the work done versus like understanding things, right? Like for instance, I don't know if I can bring up a personal story about you, but
Go for it.
so in systems, right, you had a little accident in the middle of the semester, right? And then you fell behind a little bit.
Yeah.
And then there was one assignment in particular, which we no longer do, by the way. But you were like, this assignment broke me, Bowie. Like, I couldn't do it. Like, you were just like, but like, I guess, is all that work and pain and suffering, like, does that pay off? Is that just a part of the process? Or is it sort of like not necessary? You just want to focus on concepts. You don't necessarily need to do all the work. Like, how do you, looking back on your experience, what would you say? Because it's almost finals week for them. So they can use some motivation or demotivation, however you want to take it.
I don't know if I'm the best person to answer this question, or maybe you're using me because you knew I was like a big nerd and I always was trying to understand things, which is why I became like a TA and stuff. I definitely was always the advocate for trying to understand it. That was actually like a source of tension. And like, I can remember some group projects where I'd be with another classmate who like wanted to just like get it done as fast as possible. And I was like, no, like, I really like need to understand the message queue structure. Like, I think that's just like in my nature. I would say that I think it is really important to understand the concepts, but I do also think that there's some there's some merit to like getting into like good habits and practices. And I think there's some merit to like those people who can work quickly and that kind of fail fast kind of mentality is something that I definitely didn't really develop. I'm much more of like a slower person, but that's probably more about like pacing more than about knowledge. I do think that the knowledge is important because I think that it just like you're able to look at new things and connect them back to the things that you learn, because you're not going to be doing your schoolwork in there. Sometimes, the people around you don't even know the right answer. I think that was something that's like the hardest thing about work is that like in school, Bowie knows the answer. So like if you
tend to know the answers.
Yeah, but if you bully him enough, like he'll help you out and maybe But at work, it's like my boss like might not know that he's very smart guy, like has been doing this for years. But if we're presented with a problem that's I'm working on something really new, like in a few months we're planning for me to work on something that nobody else in the team has worked on, and so if I get stuck, I mean they can help me to the best of their ability, but sometimes it's like they're not going to know the answer. So I think that having those really strong foundational knowledge and those concepts are going to help you tackle the things that are new.
All right, so moving away from CS, okay, let's talk about PEMCO.
Okay.
Right. Your external things, right? Mm-hmm. Like how did that experience? How did the non-CS part of Notre Dame help you with your life?
It made me happier for sure. I was just telling somebody about this that I was like, I don't regret it at all, because I was like, I could have been coding in my room alone, but instead I did theater. I don't know if I could make the argument that it like directly contributed to my like success as an engineer, but it definitely made me happier. And I do think that you work better and you need to have that balance. Because, you have, if you want to make CS your life, that's fantastic. And if you're in this room and you're a LUG member, it probably is a huge part of your life, right? And there are people like that, but I think there's no problem in being that person who has multiple things that you love. And also, I do think that the Notre Dame engineer tends to be a very like well-rounded person. I mean, if you wanted to go to a tech school, you could have gone to a tech school, right? But I don't think that's why anyone, not that it's a good engineering program. But like, I think that most people probably choose Notre Dame because of it's a good school, but it's much more than that. And so those other parts of your life are still important and inform like who you are as a person. At ARM, one of our core values is be your brilliant self. When you go into the corporate world, they have all these like silly things like values and stuff. that they have little slogans. And that's like one of our things is be your brilliant self. So like companies even value that you have more to offer than just you're not like a code writing monkey, right? You're a person, you have thoughts, you have different perspectives that can impact how you work.
So how do you currently maintain a work-life balance now?
I don't know, it's pretty good. I'm really lucky that my manager is very he actually reminds me a lot of you, Bowie. Like he just like I know, yeah, he's very like he's kind of a teacher. So he really values like our development and learning, and so he will give a lot of time, and his whole motto is like trust and responsibility is kind of how he runs the team. So he won't like micromanage. So it makes it a lot easier. Like he doesn't really care like and we have a lot of people on my team are from India, actually. He's from India as well. So like my one coworker will like call his parents in India, like in the middle of the day, but then like he'll work later. And we also like half our team is in Shanghai. So we'll have like these late night meetings and like these early morning meetings, which like kind of stink. But then it's like, he's okay with you like logging off a little early because of that, or, sleeping in the next day or something. So like I'm really lucky because I think my work specifically allows me to do that. But I think also just making time for things and like having regular like social things planned. I think that helps as well.
Are there any other questions? Simon has one.
Okay, so you mentioned like issues with time zones, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. ARM is an English company, right? Do you have issues with like scheduling meetings where people are already offline or things like that?
Yeah. So it's funny, when I started, I was living in Pennsylvania. I because of COVID, I didn't move. I'm in Austin right now, so I'm in Central Time, but I was in Eastern Time. Half my team was in Central Time. The other half of my team was in Shanghai. And then occasionally you'd have to interact with somebody in the UK. And so it was like 4 different time zones, very confusing. It's very common at ARM that like you'll have like half a team in Shanghai, half a team in ARM or in Austin, or like half a team in UK. My rotation team was half in UK, half here. And, I think that one thing is that you learn to work a little bit more like asynchronously. Like with my partners in Shanghai, we have a weekly meeting. It's like 8 a.m. Mondays for me, and it's like late at night for them. And then other than that, it's like a lot of like Slack and email and stuff. But yeah, it's mostly just kind of a give and take. Like we have to, we'll switch on and off between morning and evening. And then for other things, you kind of just learn to like do your best at communicating through email or messaging, versus like you only like will try to make a meeting if you like really have to. Yeah, it's a bit of a pain, but it kind of works.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I do. So you said you use a lot of C, which I think is cool, but what's your take on the idea that C is like an unsafe language and it should be replaced with things like Rust?
I do not have an opinion on this, but yeah, I don't know. I think we have a lot of like, I don't know. That's actually a really good question. I think probably we're very just like entrenched in C, and there's obviously like fail safes in it, like within the process more than within the language itself to make it less unsafe, I guess. But yeah, I don't have a strong opinion on it, but sorry.
Any other questions? Nobody?
Here's something kind of off topic, but you talked about networking. What's your thoughts on IPv6? Is it right around the corner? Are we all going to switch?
No thoughts. I have to be honest. I'm like the worst person to ask these kind of questions because I tend to just like do my work and focus on what's in front of me. I don't like pay super much attention to the, I wasn't a networking person going in. I was like a Linuxy OSy person. So my networking knowledge is like pretty bad actually. So I don't pay as much attention to the outside stuff. So I have, again, no opinions. I spent 20 hours a week doing theater in school. So like I was, I have not been on like Reddit /IPv6, I'm like, if you want to do that, I'm happy for you, and I'm glad that you're really interested in that. But I have to say,
Kathleen, how many LUG meetings did you go to as undergrad?
I went to 2. I went to I had 2 meetings with LUG. I was not
I thought you were gonna say 0. So
2. There was like a moment where I thought I was gonna become that person, and then I was like, no, I'm not.
thanks, Kathleen. All right.
I'm very happy for you. I love it's a great community. I love that it exists, but I just personally was like, I'm coding all day. I'm gonna spend my nights I'm a very artistic person, so I was spending my outside time doing different things.
Also, fun fact, she was on Wheel of Fortune. Is that correct?
I was.
How much did you win?
I won $15,000 in cash and a trip to Aruba.
Wow.
Good job.
That's the value of a Notre Dame undergraduate education.
That is.
One final question, Kathleen. So you talked about personal reputation. So do you now have a certain reputation in the community? Do you have a certain amount of ownership of any particular thing? And like have like people like bombarded you trying to like recruit you or poach you for things?
Not quite so much, because I'm still kind of like a baby engineer. Again, I think with this particular project, it's a bit of a learning curve. Not a bit of a learning curve, it's like a big learning curve. I'm just now starting to get to that. And I've been here for 1.5 years, right? And I took like 5 months on a rotation. So you might like subtract that amount of time. So maybe about 1 year working on this project. There's a pretty big ramp to being like, because you've got people who've been working on this for years, right? So working on it for like 1 year is kind of like, things just take longer. It's just because the code is more complex, right? But I'm just now kind of getting to that point. And I have had like 1 or 2 patches that were like a larger thing. And I'm working on something right now that's like going to be a few months, and that I have like ownership over. And then like the next thing I work on that we already have slated, that is definitely going to be like just mine, because I'm the only one who's going to like really fully understand it. But am I like a maintainer? Like, no, that's like way down the line.
All right, one actual final question. Are you hiring?
Like, I wish we were. I don't know. ARM itself might be hiring, I'm not sure, but my team in particular is not currently hiring. So I don't have like an in. Like, I wish I could be like, here's a job, but you'd have to go to like careers.arm.com and apply like anybody else. Basically, I don't really have like a. What
was your pathway?
My pathway was, I was at Grace Hopper, but I didn't interview at Grace Hopper. It's not like I got anything at Grace Hopper. It's just, that's where I learned about, I went up to the tent or the place at Grace Hopper. I went up to the people because I was like, wanted to like fangirl about CompArc and be like, oh my God, the ARM assembly language. Literally, that was my only intent. I did not at all think about getting a job or anything. I was just like, that's so cool. You have an assembly language. And they're like, we're hiring. I was like, great. And I went and applied online and I went through the regular process. I didn't have like it's not like Michigan where they like recruit. I want to come and go to career fair at some point, but we're not hiring right now. So they're not going to send me there, but no special in. I just applied online.
Now, if I recall correctly, you said that after your interview, the question they asked you involved what, mutexes?
Linked lists.
What was it?
Linked lists.
Linked lists? Still?
They asked me, which is funny because I don't think I've used a linked list in all of my work here, but they asked me this. They didn't. My 2 coworkers didn't coordinate with each other, and they asked me the same question twice, which was, did you do something from a linked list? Yep.
Very interesting. That may or may not be on the final, but we'll see.
Yeah, know your linked lists.
Any final questions before we finally let her go? All right, well, thank you very much, Kathleen. Give us a round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy good luck with exams.
Yep. See you, Kathleen. We'll keep in touch. Well, I'll see you at graduation.
Yep. See you then.
See ya.
Bye-bye.